Hello, welcome to another episode of Going Green. I'm your host, Kathleen Harvey. I enjoy having a variety of trees, plants, and shrubs in my yard, but I don't have an unlimited budget. So, how do I reconcile my desire for plants with my limited budget? Today's episode is about swapping. Let's get started. It's fall here in South Jersey, which means the leaves are turning and starting to drop. Perennials are going to seed. So one of the things that I do is collect seeds from the perennials that are producing them in the fall, and I swap them with my gardening friends. This plant is a cleome. Common name is spider flower. That's because of all of these little frilly things that you see out here. They bloom all summer long. They're an annual, what's called a self-sowing annual. So even though frost will kill them back and they won't come back next year, what you can do is collect seeds or even just let some of the seeds fall, and those seeds will sprout for you next spring and you'll get new flowers. So what I do is, because I have so many of these, you can see each one of these little things that looks like a little string bean. These are actually seed pods. So what I do is, when they're ripe, I get a cup and I collect the seeds. So what we do is we look for seed pods. If we gently pull on them, that one's not ripe. We look for seed pods. They will gently pop open and spill the seeds into my cup. So we can see here, this one is ripe, and it's full of seeds. So what I'm doing is getting these seeds, if you can see them here, and I'm gently pushing them into the cup. These seeds are nice and ripe. If you have to push on this too hard, that means the seeds aren't ready yet. But these seeds are nice and ripe. I'm putting them into a paper cup. I will later transfer to an envelope. Anything paper bag, anything paper that's breathable will do fine. What you don't want to do is put them in plastic, because then they can't breathe and they'll rot. So you want them to dry out for you, and then they'll be good to go for next year. And when you're here's another one. And when you're done collecting these seeds, we'll have lots and lots of them. Some of them will fall naturally on your own. You see these empty husks? That means that they've already ripened and just fallen on their own. So I'll have them here next year automatically. So that means the ones I'm gathering, I can share with my gardening friends and get seeds of something I don't have. So I can add yet more variety to my garden next spring. See, the ones that aren't popping easily, that means these aren't ripe yet. So we want to leave them to ripen on the plant just a little bit longer. And the husks we don't need, so we pull them out and we just throw them in the bed. They'll decompose. If there's a seed or two stuck to them, well, so much the better. We'll have them for next spring. What we wind up with is, as you can see, there's probably hundreds of seeds in there. I don't need all of those. So I will actually put some of these in envelopes and share them with my friends. So that's one way you can expand your variety of flowers in your garden. This is a red salvia. It has pretty red flowers that have been growing in the garden all summer. You see, it's in a pot. I traded with a gardening friend for something that I didn't have, which is the salvia, for something that I had plenty of. But I never got around to planting it in the garden. This is another self-sowing annual, which means frost is going to kill it. So what I'm going to do is not really bother to plant it, because it's going to die anyway, but rather just place it in the garden where I want it to grow next spring. And as long as I don't mulch it, the seeds can come into contact with the soil, they'll drop and they'll grow for me next spring. So here's where I want it to grow next spring. So I'm putting it here. I have no mulch down, and the seeds will just drop, hit the soil, and as long as they can come into contact with the soil, they'll resprout themselves next spring, and I'll have lots of pretty red salvia here for next spring. In this cup, I have tiny little seedlings. This plant is called a hellebore. Common name is Lenten Rose or Christmas rose. These bloom in very, very late winter into early spring. These are one of the first things to bloom in your yard. This is the native species. I have a huge one, a mother plant if you will, in my backyard. I was digging around because I wanted to plant something near it and accidentally dug up some seedlings that were growing. So because these were dug out accidentally, I didn't want to just throw them away. I potted them up, and you see they're growing very nicely. So I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to transplant these to another area of my yard or maybe give them to a friend. And once these get going, these are perennials, which means they will come back every year. So these are kind of like hostas if you're familiar with hostas. The frost, the winter, will kill the leaves, the whole top's back, but the roots, the part underneath the soil, will still be alive. But they'll come back year after year once they get going. Here we have two different varieties of lantanas. These aren't natively growing in our area. These like a warmer climate. So one of the things you can do, that many growers do to save money, is to take cuttings of these and save them for next spring. So basically all you do is you look for a stem, you cut back, you take the flowers off, and then you put them in a very porous potting soil, a sterile soil mix. I use a Pro Mix, which is a peat-based mix, and I'll save cuttings of these over the winter. You can just keep them in your windowsill. They won't bloom for you, but they'll stay alive, and then you can plant them out again next spring. And look at all the beautiful flowers you get to enjoy all summer long. We even have some tomatoes that are still ripening on the vine until the hard freeze knocks them back. So I'm waiting for the last of these to harvest so I can make just one more thing before the summer growing season is totally over. This shrub is what's called a red twig dogwood, and it's variegated. The leaves have a really pretty green and white variegation. These are different than the tree dogwoods in that this is more shrubby. It's multi-stemmed instead of a single stemmed. They get different kinds of flowers, but one of the neat things is that they have interest all year long, because in the summertime the warmth of the sun turns the stems green, but the cold weather, like we're getting into now, as the temperatures cool, the stems turn this brilliant shade of red. So the leaves that you see now, a lot of them are drying out, and they don't look all that nice, but they're not dying, they're just going dormant for the winter time. But since the temperatures are cooling, you see these stems are turning a nice brilliant red color, and they'll stay this color all winter long, so to give you some additional winter interest. And they look really, really neat with snow on them, because you see this brilliant red against the white snow. Hopefully we won't get a lot of it, but if we do, it's something pretty to look at instead of just all gray all winter long. One of the things I did, because a friend of mine wanted a piece of this, these aren't really easy to take cuttings of and get cuttings growing, but what I did was I took a branch. Because these branches are not brittle, they bend so easily, I bent it all the way down in the springtime, nicked the base of the stem just a little bit, and put the stem in a pot and put a rock over it and left it there all summer long. This is called layering. So this is yet another way to propagate plants and share with friends. So now that it's fall, I've separated the stem, and you see there are several stems that are growing. You can see the leaves are the same. It's the same kind of plant. and it actually threw up additional stems. So I've actually got a nice sized clump growing here that I can share with some friends. And they can plant these out next spring. And in a couple of years, it'll look just like this. This is Althea blue chiffon. Common name is Rose of Sharon or hardy hibiscus, because these variety of shrubs have pretty flowers that look rather like the tropical hibiscus, but they can grow in our area and survive the cold winters. These are a deciduous shrub, much like an oak or maple tree, which means that they lose their leaves in the fall, but they'll regrow in the spring and the summer and give you pretty flowers in late summer, usually into late fall. If you look here, this fuzzy part that I just pulled off is a seed pod. This was a flower that one of our pollinating friends came by and pollinated it for us, and it ripened into a full seed pod. So this we can share with friends, and it'll grow eventually into another bush. And one of these seeds from one of my other bushes somehow wound up near my front door in a bad spot. Perfectly healthy plant, but it's in a bad spot. So what I want to do is dig it out and share it with a friend. Fall is a time when plants start to go dormant, which means the leaves turn beautiful colors like we see, and they eventually drop off. That means that they're going into hibernation, which is a really good time for digging and transplanting. So if you have a tree or a shrub that just isn't in a good spot, but it's a perfectly good plant, it's got to come out, but you don't want to throw it away, and you don't want to dig it in the dead of winter or the middle of the summer. Fall, perfect time. So let me show you how to dig. We'll pot this up and get it ready to share with a friend. Now we've been able to get this Rose of Sharon out of the ground, but it's what's referred to as bare rooting. You see all these nice roots, the nice green healthy roots, and what we're going to do is immediately pot this up in another pot with lots of soil around it right away. Don't leave it out because you don't want the roots to dry out. But at this time of year, it's perfectly fine to take it out of the ground like this as long as you pot it up right away. You can either use the soil that came with it, or if you have some potting soil, anything that's handy. Mix it with your homemade compost and transplant it into your garden right away, and we're good to go. What I've put in this pot is a combination of mineral soil, which means it's soil that came out of the hole that it was growing in, plus I've mixed in some homemade compost to give it an extra good boost. And that way I can put it in a pot and give it to a friend. Okay, what I've done is position the plant so that the roots are completely contained within a pot. Doesn't need to be a huge pot, just enough to hold it. Tuck the roots all the way down into the pot, and then what I'm going to do is gently add the soil while holding the plant all the way around. Tuck it around the roots, just gently covering the roots. We have lots of good compost mixed with mineral soil. Gently tamp it down, and as long as you transplant it right away, you'll be fine. If you have to wait a couple of days, make sure that you water it in well, and then it should hold. Another good tip I use is I tell my friends when they're going to transplant a plant to plant it right before it's supposed to rain. That way, Mother Nature will make sure that it gets watered in really well for you. And that's all there is to it. So I've shown you lots of ways to propagate your plants and share seeds, plants, and cuttings with your friends. That way you can expand the colors, textures, and variety of things that you have in your garden and give back to some other people who may not have as much as you do. That's all we have for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Kathleen Harvey, your host of Going Green. See you next time.